What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking, finally, about the latest episode of WWE Icons on Beth Phoenix. And I say finally because this special went up 8 days ago from when I'm recording this right now. A lot like when I started watching the Broken Skull sessions with Randy Orton. I didn't start watching it and finishing it until literally a week after it aired. This was no different. The last couple of weeks for me have been incredibly busy, and the timing could not be worse with WrestleMania week finally upon us. But I thought I would get this out of the way before WrestleMania craziness kicked in, and it already has. And I say get it out of the way, but really this was a awesome special. And I knew it would be after watching that Yokozuna edition of Icons right after the Rumble. Beth Phoenix isn't as big of a name as Yokozuna, and when you look at the names they were analyzing for this show, from Yokozuna to Lex Luger to I was going to say Beth Phoenix, but from Luger to Yokozuna to British Bulldog to even Rob Van Dam, Beth Phoenix, I will say, honestly stuck out like a sore thumb, but not in a bad way. Just in the sense that when you think of and I realize they wanted to get a female in there, but when I think of female legends, I mean, obviously Phoenix would be on that list, but not number one, I don't think. I would have gone with someone like a Trish or a Lita or even a Mickie James, but I understand. Well, one, Mickie James is still active, I believe. She hasn't wrestled in forever, but Mickie James. But at least with Trish and Lita, they've done so many documentaries on those women that with, I think, this Icon series, they wanted to kind of really shine a light on those who don't ordinarily and usually get the spotlight, which is probably why they went with Phoenix. She's also someone that's in the company right now, doesn't have as depressing of a story as Yokozuna or Bulldog or Luger. Rob Van Dam's story isn't really depressing, but it's definitely full of its highs and lows. Phoenix has its highs and lows, but not in the same way as those other people do. But this ended up being a great documentary. And I was already expecting it to be good based off how well done the Yokozuna one was. But this was really, really good. And I implore anyone, a week later, to check this out if you haven't already. So we kick off this documentary here from a lot of talking heads and Beth herself talking about how she's kept all of her gear over the years as symbols of how far she's come in her life and how she hopes her kids, and she has 2 daughters, love something eventually as much as she loves wrestling with whatever it is they want to pursue. So to kind of kick the thing off, in addition to all that other stuff, when we really started off here, she talks about the appeal of wrestling and how you don't even have to know the English language or the language of wrestling to really appreciate and love the art of professional wrestling. All you have to know is who the good guy is, who the bad guy is, feel the crowd, and you're hooked. And she recalls watching wrestling growing up at her grandmother's house with her brother Eric. And her grandmother was a huge wrestling fan, a very, not shy, but very quiet. Did they say Russian? Russian grandmother, I believe. She was very quiet, but she brought the wild side out of her when she watched professional wrestling. And she honestly wanted to be like Ivan Putski, I think, because that was her grandmother's favorite. So she told her mom, whose name is Grace, that she wanted to wrestle. And the mom didn't really get it, and she said, there's not many women's wrestlers, and she pointed out Miss Elizabeth, but she's like, well, they don't really wrestle, they're more managers, but she still wanted to do it anyway. It wasn't until she watched WrestleMania 10, specifically Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, one of, if not the greatest opener in WrestleMania history, that it dawned on her that this was what she wanted to do. She really wanted to go to a show, couldn't afford it as a kid, couldn't afford tickets, until she won a coloring contest, and I thought this was a really cool story. She won a coloring contest and was able to bring herself and 3 other people. So she brought, obviously, in addition to herself, her mom, her grandmother, and her brother Eric. And they all got to attend a WWE show. And she fell in love with it right then and there. She created this collage of all the photos that she took on this camera. And I mean, this is back in the 90s. So you don't have the phones that we do today. She could only take 24 pictures. And she said she was such a Razor Ramon fan. And I think Savio Vega was with him. She took 10 of her 24 pictures of Razor Ramon, which is hilarious. And the last photo that she took was of Owen Hart making his way down to the ring. And she's very grateful that she had that opportunity to see Owen Hart perform live. We fast forward to 1996. She's a sophomore at Notre Dame High School in Elmira, New York. I believe that's how you pronounce it. She did everything, did all the extracurricular activities from choir to tennis and to band to everything else in between. But, she also was dealing with some stuff at that point from trying to lose weight in an unhealthy way. She knew that body image would be a challenge for her. But one person that really helped motivate her and look at the bright side was Chyna. She was enamored by Chyna, inspired by Chyna, because she was so different than any other woman that had come through WWE up to that point. Physically, she was different. Beth felt like that she could relate to her. Beth had muscles. I mean, she was doing all these sports and whatnot, that she had a different body type than most girls her age at that point. And Chyna really helped inspire her and made her feel comfortable in her own skin, which I thought was really cool. Beth went to the gym every day after school and even on weekends. She liked pushing herself to the limit in the gym and even still does that to this day. She wanted to be exactly like Chyna. But she knew that she needed to start her dream of becoming a professional wrestler by joining the wrestling team. So they didn't have a female wrestling team at that point, obviously. I'm not even sure if many schools do even nowadays. Honestly, I'm not sure. I graduated almost 10 years ago, so I don't know. My school didn't even have a male wrestling team, but they didn't have a female wrestling team at her school at Notre Dame High School back in the 90s, so she joined the male wrestling team instead. She put in the application. She got called into the principal's office that same day, and they asked her, is this something you really want to do? And she's like, yeah, this was not a mistake. And they asked, is it really something you want to do? You know what I mean? And she said yes. And she was on the team. It helped that her brother was actually already on the team, because we hear from the coach himself, and he had said he was either on the team previously or on the team at that point, but she had a lot of support. She wasn't given special treatment, and we kind of heard the same thing from the Heather documentary, which they put up about a month ago, which was really, really good, about how despite being the first female on the team, it's not like they took it easy on her or gave her, special treatment or whatever. They didn't. And she was just like anyone else on the team. She did very well. She beat a boy once at one of the meets. She worked really, really hard. And after beating one of the guys, her entire team just exploded in excitement, which was cool. And getting that sense of satisfaction was huge for her. And getting her own varsity jacket with, I think, tennis on it. I forgot what the other thing was. Tennis, something, and wrestling. It was an embroidered high school varsity jacket for all three sports that she did in high school. That was a very big deal to her, and she still has it to this day. So she mentioned that she attended college in Buffalo, New York, and initially she didn't do well academically. And she was talking to her friend Janet, or it might have been her roommate, who actually pushed her to start wrestling right then and there. Because Beth had mentioned, my dream is to be a pro wrestler, and I want to do it at some point. And Janet was like, why not now? And she didn't drop out of college to do it. She balanced, between being in college and wrestling. So she started right away. She debuted in 2001. That was when she started training and wrestling. And her mom was against it. But in her mom's opinion, if it was something that made her, daughter happy, then she was on board with it. As long as she was doing well academically, then that was really all that mattered. So once Beth switched her major to criminal justice, she found a lot more success, felt a lot more comfortable, did a lot better in school. She also started getting formal training from Ron Hutchinson, who also helped train Edge, Christian, Trish Stratus. And she worked the indies at that point, and she tried out for Tough Enough Season 3. This I did not know. There was a lot of stuff about this documentary that I did not previously know about Beth, which is why I thought it was so good. And maybe it's been public knowledge, and it probably has, I just didn't know. But yeah, so she was on the third season of Tough Enough. She made it past the first round of cuts. And around that time, she just graduated college. She almost landed a federal job that would have been a nice position for her for the rest of her life, retire at a nice age, make a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But she left that job to go do this tryout. She drove 10 hours to go to this audition. They show her audition. She took a risk with the promo. And I thought Al Snow and John Gaborik, who was there as well, were going to hate it. But they actually really liked it. And they advanced her to the next round. They sent her plane tickets to Hollywood. But it was there that they discovered that she had a heart issue. And there was a problem on her EKG, I believe it was. And they told her that she was disqualified from competing, which sounds a lot like Shotzi Blackheart. She actually went through the same exact thing. I think it was also a heart issue in 2015, almost 10, 15 years later, also for Tough Enough. So she had to quit her job. She actually went ahead and quit her job to do Tough Enough, but she was then sent home with nowhere to go from there. She eventually grew out of the medication, but she still missed her opportunity to be on Tough Enough. So a couple of years later, She was told, hey, listen, if you can get your tape to Molly Holly, she might be able to help you get your way into WWE, because she was really, really desperate to get there at that point. That was her dream. So she went to WrestleMania Access. This was probably 02 in Toronto, although I could be wrong. I'm not sure when this would have been. Maybe 04. Maybe I think it was probably either 02 or 04. In 04, they were in Madison Square Garden, so that would make sense. She got to meet Molly Holly at Access, and she almost didn't make it, but The Rock came out for a promo on the other side of Access, and I've been to Access, so I can relate to this. And that cleared out the entire line for the most part. So she got to meet Molly Holly, gave her tape, and Molly Holly not only remembered this interaction with Beth, but she went right to the back of Access, watched Beth's tape right then and there with, who was it? Not Danny Davis. It was someone that was, Dr. Tom Pritchard. She knew if she gave the tape to Molly Holly, then she could give it to Dr. Tom. But Molly sat there and watched the tape, and she felt comfortable enough and confident enough in Beth's ability to do well that she knew it was, that she felt it was a right fit to pass along the tape to someone higher up in the hierarchy. You know what I mean? So anyway, she did not get hired. She was brought in as an extra 6 months later. Molly helped her, train in the ring, wrestling her in the ring, really showing the officials what she was made of. And Molly Holly helped her a lot, and which I'll get to in a second, even more so than that. Like I said, she didn't get hired. They did hire Gail Kim from that tryout, but she talked to Eugene, or Nick Dinsmore, otherwise known as Eugene to WWE fans. He told her to go to OVW. That's probably your best bet to get your foot in the door at WWE. Danny Davis offered her a chance to come train, not sign her to OVW, but come train there. And Molly, Beth was already paying for her tuition at that point, her student loans, stuff like that, among other normal bills. She didn't really have a lot of money to go train there until Molly Holly helped pay for her tuition, which was huge. Molly Holly really believed in her and believed in her chances to get to WWE, which I thought was really fucking cool, because she didn't have to do that. And thank God Molly Holly is going into the Hall of Fame this year. And she really should have gone in a long time ago, but better late than never. Mickie James, who was in OVW at that time, said it felt like a family in OVW. And Beth Phoenix was a rare case of someone who got TV time in the company in OVW without actually having signed a contract to the company. We hear from Tommy Dreamer, which I thought was awesome. Dreamer played a very pivotal role in signing Beth to a WWE deal. And he talked about how much he loved hiring people. The cool thing about this appearance from Tommy, and Tommy's awesome just in general, just a great human being, but Tommy's currently in Impact as an executive wrestler over there. And he's done shots for WWE before while being with Impact, but I thought it was cool they included him in this doc, despite the fact he's in Impact currently, so I thought that was really cool. So anyway, WWE basically told her that they wanted another Trish, but she wasn't comfortable with that. She did the whole sex appeal thing, tried to play up her ass that she talked about, did more makeup, but she was never comfortable with that. And she eventually got to a point where she ran out of money while paying for her student loans, among other things, and while working 2 jobs at a Perkins and a fucking golf course. And she decided it was time to go home. And her mom agreed, like, hey, you should probably, quit this and move on, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, no, I want to see it through. But then she got to a point, okay, I should probably move on because they're not going to sign me. Until Dreamer called her while she was leaving her shift at Perkins to tell her that they wanted to hire her. She debuted on Raw, I guess soon after, because they immediately transitioned from that to her Raw debut, so I'm not sure what the timetable was there. But she debuted on Raw soon after attacking Mickie James, the same way that Mickie debuted on Raw going after Trish. And she was aligned with Trish for a little while. For a few weeks there on Raw, she made her singles debut in the ring on Raw against Victoria. Within the first minute of the match, not even. She thought she lost a tooth on a slap. The spot was supposed to be Victoria slaps her, Beth slaps her back. Victoria slapped her so hard and just in a weird place and her jaw was open, blah, 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 that she actually shattered her entire jaw. And she went to the doctors, and she didn't think it was that bad initially until the doctors looked at it, the other women looked at it, and they told her, listen, you need complete plastic surgery to fix your jaw, get some plates in there, metal, shit like that. So she was done for. Her push was done for. She wasn't fired by WWE, but she knew her push was done for. And her mom knew immediately watching the show that her daughter was hurt. So she eventually healed up, but Creative at that point, by the time she came back, had nothing for her. So she had to start all over. She reported back to OVW. She got the Glamazon nickname, she said, from Sex and the City, which is funny. She reinvented herself there, became a kind of a mix of Chyna and Trish. And that got her back on the road on WWE main roster TV. Back on Raw, she started to wear a tiara to really stand out from the other women. We hear from Edge, we hear from Christian, which I thought was cool because Christian obviously recorded his part of the doc here many, many months ago, if only earlier this year. But he's now in AEW, so the fact they kept him in this thing I thought was cool. Like the same way that they kept the Orton Christian talk in the Broken Skull Sessions podcast a few weeks ago, I'm glad they kept this in there as well. So anyway, she wore China-inspired gear for her No Mercy 2007 match for the Women's Championship, I believe against Mickie James. And like I said, she wanted to become the hybrid of China and Trish. So she won the Women's Championship that night, which meant a lot to her, the same title held by Molly Holly, China, Trish Stratus, women like that. And that was when she really started to realize that she would find success by being not the next Trish Stratus, but the first Beth Phoenix. And her mom was really happy for her. Her work inspired the likes of Ember Moon, Rhea Ripley, who said that she wrestles like a dude. But there's nothing wrong with that. And she was different than all the other women that really kind of put Rhea Ripley on the right path coming up in the business in the last few years. We hear from Santino Marella, who was obviously very not influential, but like big in the career of Beth with the whole Glamorella stuff. And he said he enjoyed their time together till the end. They don't really get into the Glamorella stuff at all. They briefly mention it. But I'm glad I'm recording this a week later because they've actually put out extras from this Icons doc on the WWE YouTube channel and on WWE.com. And one of the extras was like a 5-minute clip with Santino and Beth talking about their time together and like the Santino Marella crap, which was stupid, but it was a guilty pleasure of mine at the time. It was just that stupid. But I thought that was cool. They ended up saving that stuff for a different clip because it didn't exactly fit the vibe of the doc. But anyway, we kind of fast forward to 2010. Dean Malenko asked her about doing the Royal Rumble, the men's Rumble at that point, and just told her, listen, if this gets out, it's probably not going to happen. And thankfully it didn't. She got to do it, and she had the support from all the male wrestlers, and it was a really cool moment for her. She recalls MySpacing Natalya, or as she calls her, Natty, and that was their first interaction. So this is going back in like probably the mid-2000s. I was never a MySpace guy. That was kind of before my time. I kind of got in there with the beginning of Facebook. But she probably MySpaced Natalya in the mid-2000s while she was trying to get her way into WWE. And she was always a big Hart fan, obviously, and they've always felt very, like they could relate to one another with their body image issues and stuff like that, how they felt about each other and themselves and whatever, and how they felt about wrestling. So when they teamed up on TV as the Divas of Doom in 2011, which was an incredibly criminally short run, they worked so well together aside from like the late 2010 stuff they did. As the Divas of Doom, that was a very short run. And that was well before they had the tag titles, obviously, but they always focused on the wrestling. And Beth was Divas champion for a long time alongside Beth Phoenix. Beth was champion for a long time alongside Natalya. And we hear from Charlotte Flair, who said that her brother said to her that she should be like Beth Phoenix and Natalya. She should be like the Divas of Doom if she were to break into WWE. And she says they broke all the glass ceilings for the women. We hear from Edge, and they kind of talk about how they met in 2011. It wasn't really until Edge's appreciation night when he retired in September of 2011, or he retired in early 2011, but he had an appreciation night in late 2011, I think like in Canada or something. They didn't really know until that point how much they actually had in common with each other. Beyond just wrestling. And Edge even asked Natty, like, what's her deal? What's her status? You know what I mean? So I thought that was funny. That he used Natalya to get to Beth Phoenix. But yeah, they obviously ended up falling in love, having kids, blah, blah, blah. We'll get to the kid stuff later on. She felt like she hit her stride as a wrestler in 2012. She was a part of a lot of pay-per-views, Divas Championship matches, WrestleMania, competing against Maria Menounos and Kelly alongside Eve Torres. But her contract was coming up in October of that year. And it wasn't that she was set in stone on leaving, but it was a couple different factors that contributed to her decision to leave WWE. One, in the span of just 1 year, she lost both of her grandparents, including the aforementioned grandmother, and her uncle, all of whom she was close with. And she was also very frustrated with the lack of change in the women's division. She tried as best as she could to kind of change the narrative and how people viewed women's wrestling in that company, and she did. She definitely did. But it wasn't enough at that point. It really wouldn't be until NXT that the landscape of women's wrestling changed in WWE. But she tried her best. She had her last match in October of 2012, and that was it for her. But she also wanted to start a family. So she told Vince that she was done, and it was one of the hardest things she ever had to do. Vince hugged her. He thanked her for all that she did for them, which was cool, and she went out to go start a family. So she and Edge had their first daughter, Lyric, in 2013, and then Ruby, their second daughter, in 2016. And she's always wanted to be the best mother possible. Edge recorded her reaction to him finding out about her going into the Hall of Fame. Usually they have someone from the company call the talent and say, hey, you're going into the Hall of Fame, or are you busy WrestleMania weekend because we want to induct you, blah, blah, blah. It was actually Edge who got that chance to tell Beth, his wife, that she was Hall of Fame bound, and she couldn't believe it. And they got to show the video here. I'm not sure if that's ever been released before, but I thought that was really fucking cool. And she never really thought, not that it would even never happen, but that she never even thought it was a possibility. She never even thought she was remotely close to being on that level. And yeah, it did happen a little soon. I think she is the youngest inductee ever into the WWE Hall of Fame. They probably should have inducted Molly Holly and women like that before inducting Beth, but she was still a great fit. And, I thought she's obviously very deserving. It was more really just a matter of when than if. But it was really around that weekend that she got to reflect on her career, let it sink in how much she actually accomplished in wrestling. Molly Holly praised her speech, Edge praised her speech, and she had a very good speech. So you go forward about a year, she got a call about being in the first ever Women's Royal Rumble, which was an awesome opportunity for her and very deserving for all that she did for the women's wrestling division during her career. And she got to take part in that. She talked about how WrestleMania 35 was a fitting final chapter for her, having really realized that she wanted to become a wrestler by watching a Bret Hart match at WrestleMania 10 against Owen Hart. It was then Bret Hart who accompanied her and Natalya to the ring for her last WrestleMania match to date. Not her last match, period, because she was in the Rumble in 2020, but her last formal match to date, I believe, at WrestleMania 35, alongside Natalya for the tag titles, which I thought was really cool. And there's actually an extended look at that match and her thoughts on it and her gear and the Bret Hart involvement on YouTube as well. So that's an extended extra on the YouTube channel if you want to check it out. But yeah, she's always busy juggling various things. She got her master's degree in the last couple of years. She stays physically ready, which was what led her to being included in the Women's Royal Rumble again in 2020, the same night her husband made his grand return to the ring, Edge, at the Royal Rumble 2020. And she got busted open in the match. She looked like a badass. Edge even said that multiple times to multiple different people, including Beth herself. It really brought out the warrior in her, she said, and it was a great moment. She looked fucking terrifying in there. Eventually, she joined the NXT commentary team. I think at that point, she was already on the NXT commentary team. I think she joined in 2019 after Percy Watson left. I forgot when that was exactly. But she receives praise from Ember Moon, Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, all of whom have modeled their careers after Beth Phoenix. And if there's any one takeaway from her story, if there's two takeaways, it's these two things. One, she hopes being persistent shows that you can be successful, and also that not being told no can eventually lead to you being successful as well. So she hopes those are the two biggest takeaways from her story. Like I said, this was a great documentary. This was really, really good. They had a lot of great talking heads, a cool appearance from Tommy Dreamer, who they didn't have to include here, but they did. They could have taken out the Christian stuff because he wasn't in there very long, but I'm glad they included it. But yeah, this was awesome. And Beth is a great story that I don't think has enough, that gets enough attention. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this doc I did not know previously about Beth. Even watching her Hall of Fame speech when it aired 4 years ago, I didn't know any of this stuff. So this was awesome. This was really, really great stuff. Check it out right now on Peacock or WWE Network outside of the U.S. It's well worth the hour and 8 minutes that it went for. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out these reviews and the videos. I appreciate it. WrestleMania week is fucking loaded. There's so much content going up this week here on the channel, in addition to all the other interviews and articles that I'm doing, in addition to everything else, podcasts. So stay tuned for all of that. Have a great week. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for all of the daily content en route to WrestleMania 37 and so much more. Be sure to hit that bell button as well to be notified for all the videos, to be notified about all the videos that go up here on the channel. But like I said, enjoy WrestleMania week, guys. It's a very exciting time, regardless of what your thoughts on the card itself are. And be excited for all the stuff coming here to the channel in the days to come. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.